The kingdom of Alarion slept beneath endless clouds. Its nights were longer than its days, and the moon often shone red like a wound that never healed. Legends whispered that the ruler of this land, King Kael Vareth, had once been human, before a curse turned his heart to stone and his blood to something darker. He ruled from his fortress, Vareth Hollow, high above the misty mountains, far from the warmth of human life. Far below that cold castle, in a small village near the forest edge, lived Alara Wynn. She was a simple waitress at the Lantern Inn, where tired travelers stopped to eat, drink, and forget their troubles. She was quiet but kind, known for her gentle voice and strange silver eyes. No one knew much about her past, only that she had come to the village 2 winters ago, carrying nothing but a pendant shaped like a crescent moon. Alara was used to long nights, cleaning tables and serving food to people who rarely noticed her. But sometimes when she looked through the window and saw the mountains glowing faintly beneath the moon, she felt something stir deep inside her. It was a feeling she couldn't explain, like someone far away was waiting for her to remember them. One stormy night, when the rain fell hard and thunder shook the windows, a sound echoed outside the inn, a crash, followed by a child's scream. Alara's heart jumped. She ran outside into the storm. There, near the road, a carriage had overturned, its wheel broken and its horses gone. Inside, she found a little girl no older than 8, pale as snow, dressed in silk soaked with rain. Her eyes were deep crimson, glowing faintly even in the dark. The girl didn't speak. She just stared at Alara, frightened and shivering. Then from the woods behind them, shadows moved, dark figures with burning eyes and the smell of death. Alara froze for only a moment before stepping in front of the child. "Stay behind me," she whispered. The creatures circled them, whispering in voices that were not human. One of them stepped forward, tall and thin, its mouth curling into a grin. "Give us the child, human. She does not belong to your kind." Alara's hands shook, but she tightened her grip on the small silver knife she carried from the kitchen. "Then you'll have to go through me." The creature laughed, but before it could strike, Alara threw salt from her apron and swung the blade. The salt burned its skin and it screamed. In that instant, something changed. A bright light burst from Alara's pendant, forcing the creatures to retreat, hissing and fading into the storm. When the thunder finally faded, only the rain remained. The girl was safe. Alara fell to her knees, breathless, her hands trembling. The little girl touched her face gently and whispered for the first time, her voice soft and cold. "Thank you." Alara smiled faintly. "You're safe now," but the girl didn't answer. She fainted in Alara's arms. By morning, the storm had passed. The innkeeper and a few villagers helped Alara bring the child inside and wrap her in warm blankets. When Alara brushed her hair aside, she noticed a small crest carved into the child's necklace, a bat with silver wings. She had seen it before in books of ancient history. It was the royal mark of the vampire king. Before she could make sense of it, the doors of the inn burst open. Soldiers in black armor entered, their cloaks soaked in rain. Their leader stepped forward, tall and cold, his eyes as pale as frost. "You have something that belongs to the crown," he said. Alara stood protectively in front of the girl. "She's just a child." "She is the Princess of Vareth," the man replied. "You will come with us." Alara didn't resist. Something deep inside her said she had no choice. The girl, now awake, clung to her hand. "Don't leave me," she whispered. "I won't," Alara promised. The journey to Vareth Hollow took 2 days. The road twisted through fog and mountains until the black spires of the castle rose ahead, cutting through the clouds like blades. The air grew colder and the sky darker, as if sunlight feared to enter that land. When they arrived, Alara felt her courage tremble. The grand hall was vast and silent, its floor made of polished obsidian. Candles burned with blue flames and shadows moved like they were alive. At the far end, upon a throne of stone and silver, sat King Kael Vareth. He was tall and still, dressed in black and crimson, his crown glinting faintly under the pale light. His face was calm but unreadable, like a statue carved from moonlight. His eyes, dark and ancient, seemed to see everything. When Alara and the child entered, the hall fell silent. The little girl ran to him. "Father," she said softly. Kael rose at once, his voice deep and smooth. "Lyra." He lifted her gently, studying her for injuries. Then his gaze turned toward Alara. "So," he said quietly, "you are the mortal who saved my daughter." Alara bowed, unsure what to say. I only did what anyone would have done. Anyone. His voice carried a faint echo, neither human nor cruel, but something in between. No mortal faces, night hunters, and lives. I didn't think, Alara admitted. I just acted. Cale studied her face for a long time. Then he stepped closer, his eyes catching the faint light of her pendant. His expression changed for the first time, a flicker of something like recognition. Where did you get that necklace? He asked sharply. It's been mine for as long as I can remember, Alara said. Why? Cale didn't answer. His hand twitched slightly as if he were restraining himself from touching it. Then he turned away. You will stay here until I decide your fate, he said. Days passed in the castle. Alara was given a small room and food, though the servants whispered and stared at her as if she were cursed. The princess, however, visited her every morning. Lyra would bring her flowers from the garden, strange white roses that glowed faintly in the dark. You're not afraid of my father, are you? Lyra asked one day. Alara smiled sadly. Should I be? Lyra shook her head. He looks angry, but he isn't. He just forgets how to feel. My mother used to say he carries too much night in his heart. Alara didn't know how to answer. She often saw Cale from afar, standing on the balcony looking at the valley below. He seemed alone, even surrounded by power. One evening, as she walked through the corridor, she found him in the library reading by candlelight. She hesitated, but he spoke without looking up. You have courage, he said. Courage is rare in this age. I didn't know I had it, Alara replied quietly. Not until that night. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. Fear does not vanish easily. You faced creatures that feed on souls. Why? Alara's voice softened. Because the child was afraid, and no one should face fear alone. Something shifted in Cale's gaze. For a heartbeat, the cold in his eyes melted. He looked away before she could speak again. That night, the sky turned crimson once more. The castle walls trembled with an ancient hum, and the candles flickered blue. Alara woke to a strange whisper calling her name. Alara, Alara! She followed the voice to the grand hall. There the throne pulsed with light like a living heart. Cale appeared beside her, his face tense. Do not move, he commanded. The voice grew louder. The mortal has returned. The seal is breaking. Alara clutched her pendant, which now glowed like molten silver. Cale's eyes widened. No, it cannot be. Before she could ask what was happening, the air cracked with energy. A gust of black wind swept through the hall, and a symbol of light burned across the floor between them. Cale looked at her as if he had seen a ghost. You, his voice broke. You carry her soul. Whose soul? Alara asked, trembling. He stepped closer, his voice low with disbelief. The one I lost to the curse. The one who tried to save me. Alara's heart pounded. What are you saying? Cale's expression was torn between awe and sorrow. You are not just a mortal waitress. You are the beginning of the end. Before Alara could move, the throne behind them split open with a thunderous crack, and the same voice whispered again, colder now. The mortal has returned. The king must choose. The flames went out. Darkness swallowed the hall. Darkness swallowed the great hall of Vareth Hollow. The candles had gone out, and only the faint light of Alara's glowing pendant kept the shadows from closing in. King Cale stood frozen before her, his face pale and unreadable. The echo of the throne's voice still lingered in the air. The mortal has returned. The king must choose. Alara looked around, frightened but calm. What does it mean? Why is it calling me? Cale's eyes glimmered with pain. It means the curse is waking again, he said quietly. The one that bound my soul to eternal night. And took everything I loved. His voice broke slightly. He turned away, hiding his expression, but Alara could hear the sorrow behind his calm. I was not born a monster, Cale said after a moment. Once I was a king of men. My kingdom was bright, full of life. But darkness came, a plague of spirits that fed on mortal souls. A woman tried to save me. She used her light to seal the curse, but the spell demanded her life. She died in my arms, and I swore never to love again. Alara's breath caught. And you think, that woman was me? Cale's eyes met hers. Not your flesh, but your soul carries her light. When you fought the night hunters, you awakened the seal between us. Alara stepped back, overwhelmed. I don't understand. I'm no sorceress. You are what fate made you, Cale interrupted gently. The same soul returned to finish what it began. The next days in the castle were heavy with silence. The servants whispered that the air felt strange, that the shadows had begun to move again when no one looked. The moon stayed red and the sky never cleared. Elara stayed close to Princess Lyra, who clung to her as if sensing danger. The little girl would ask questions about the world beyond the mountains, about sunlight, flowers, and the sea. One morning, as Elara brushed Lyra's hair, the child asked softly, "Do you think my father can be happy again?" Elara smiled faintly. "I think he wants to be. He just doesn't remember how." From the doorway, Kale watched them quietly. He said nothing, but something in his gaze softened. A memory of peace he thought he'd forgotten. That night, Kyle called Elara to the throne room. The air was cold and the fire burned blue. "The curse is feeding," he said. "The hunters you fought were only the beginning. My council fears you will destroy everything." Elara frowned. "Your council?" He nodded. "They are the ancient ones, vampires older than my reign. They believe that if my heart beats for a mortal again, our kind will fall. Then they'll come for me," Elara whispered. "They already have," Kale said quietly. "And they will not stop." There was a long silence. Kale walked closer, his expression torn between duty and something gentler. "If I send you away, they will find you. If I keep you here, they will destroy me. Then what will you do?" she asked. He looked down at her with eyes like storms. "I do not know. Every choice feels like a sin." As the nights passed, Elara began to dream again. She saw flashes of another life, herself standing beside Kale in a field of white flowers, sunlight touching their faces. His hand in hers, warm and human, a promise spoken long ago. "If ever the night takes you, I will find you again." She would wake in tears, feeling both love and grief she could not explain. One evening, she found Kyle alone in the courtyard, standing under the crimson moon. The cold wind moved his cloak like waves of shadow. "You should rest," she said softly. "I do not sleep," he replied. "Not anymore." Elara stepped closer. "You look tired." He gave a faint smile. "Immortality is a long kind of tired." For a while they stood in silence. The moonlight fell between them like a bridge of silver. Then Elara spoke. "You carry the weight of so many lives, but you still protect your daughter. You still try to be kind even when the world calls you cursed. That is not weakness, Kale. That is strength." He looked at her, truly looked, as if her words pierced through 1,000 years of sorrow. "Elara," he said quietly, "why do you not fear me?" "Because I see more than the monster," she replied. "I see the man who still hopes for light." Kale turned away quickly, but not before she saw the faint glimmer of tears he refused to shed. The next night, the castle trembled again. Dark mist rose from the throne room and the council appeared. 6 ancient vampires in silver armor, their eyes burning red. "You have grown weak, my king," one hissed. "The mortal's light poisons your rule. The curse must consume her." Kale's voice turned to steel. "You will not touch her." They surrounded him, power crackling through the air. "Then you will fall with her." Elara entered the hall just as the battle began. Lightning flashed, shadows clashed, and Kale fought like a storm unleashed. But the curse within him awakened too, black veins spreading through his skin as his power broke free. "Elara, go!" he shouted, his voice shaking the walls. "I won't," she cried back. He turned toward her, his eyes glowing crimson, fangs bared not in hunger but in pain. "If you stay, I'll lose control." But she did not run. She walked to him, her pendant shining bright as sunlight. She placed her hand on his chest. "Then take strength from me." The light flared and Kale gasped. The darkness retreated for a moment. The council screamed as the radiance burned them away one by one until only silence remained. When it was over, Kale fell to his knees, weak and trembling. "Elara," he whispered, "you cannot stay here. The curse feeds on both of us. If I love you, it will destroy everything." Elara's voice was soft but firm. "Then let it destroy what should have never been cursed." He looked up at her, eyes full of fear and longing. "If you break the curse, I will die." "Maybe not," she said gently. "Maybe you'll finally live." At dawn, Elara went to the ancient temple in the forest, the place where her dreams had always led her. The air shimmered with old magic and the ground glowed faintly beneath her feet. Kale followed her there, carrying Lyra in his arms. "You can't do this alone," he said. Elara turned, her eyes calm. "It was never just me, it's us. Light and shadow. One cannot exist without the other. Lyra ran to Alara and hugged her tightly. Please come back, Alara smiled. I will always come back, little one. She stepped into the center of the temple. The pendant on her neck lifted, glowing like a small sun. The air filled with wind and whispers, the curse fighting against her light. Kale shouted her name, but she only looked at him once more. Kyle, remember what it feels like to be human. Remember love. The light burst outward, brighter than the sun. The mountains trembled. The sky turned white. And then, silence. When the light faded, the castle of Vareth Hollow stood quiet. The red moon was gone. Sunlight touched the towers for the first time in centuries. The vampires who remained stepped out in awe, feeling warmth they had forgotten. The curse had lifted. Lyra stood in the courtyard, tears on her cheeks. Father? She whispered. From behind her, a voice spoke softly. I'm here. Kale stood in the light, no longer pale, no longer cold. His eyes were human again, warm, gentle, full of life. He looked at his hands, trembling. I'm mortal. Lyra threw her arms around him, laughing through her tears. Ilara did it. Kale's smile faded into quiet sadness. But she's gone. Lyra shook her head. She said she would come back. And she did. From the garden path, a figure appeared, walking slowly, sunlight catching her silver eyes. Ilara, dressed in simple white, looked the same yet different. Free, alive, and smiling. Kale stared in disbelief. How? Ilara touched her pendant, now only a piece of clear glass. The curse needed balance. You gave up your crown. I gave up my light. Now we are both just human. Kyle stepped closer, unable to speak. Ilara smiled softly. The night has ended, my king. He shook his head. Not a king anymore. Then just Kale, she said. He reached for her hand, and when their fingers touched, the warmth between them felt real. No magic, no curse. Just life. Lyra watched them and whispered to the wind. The king has returned, not in power, but in love. The sunlight spread across the mountains, and for the first time in 1,000 years, Ilarion was free.